welcome to today's special webinar. My name is Ellen Bright. I am a program associate with the U.S. Heartland China Association. Today, we will hear from student delegates who recently traveled to China as part of our Future Ag Leaders Delegation. For those unfamiliar with our organization, USHCA is a 501c3 nonprofit committed to building bridges and promoting opportunities between the peoples of the Heartland region and the People's Republic of China. Our website is www.usheartlandchina.org if you'd like to learn more. I encourage you to use the Q&A feature to submit any questions you have. We'll do our best to address as many of them as possible later in the program. At the end of the session, we'll be sending out a short 2-minute survey. We greatly appreciate your feedback as it helps us continue to improve our future programs. Okay, to begin, we will provide a brief overview of the trip before granting the delegates an opportunity to introduce themselves and their motivations for joining this trip, then hearing directly from the delegates in their respective fields and their primary interests, and then finishing off with a Q&A session. So here's a quick look at the distance which we covered over the course of our journey. Students arrived in Beijing before traveling to Zhengzhou City in Henan Province, known as the breadbasket of China. They then returned to Beijing for additional site visits. So the Future Ag Leaders Delegation to China, organized by the U.S. Heartland China Association in coordination with the U.S. Soybean Export Council, USSEC, successfully completed a week-long learning trip to China from June 1st through June 8th. This unique learning trip brought together student leaders from 15 universities from 15 states across the United States, many from the American heartland. And their purpose was to study and discuss crucial issues, to promote friendship, and to build trust between the next generation of agricultural leaders in the US and in China. This delegation was made possible through the support of the U.S. soy community, state and local trade associations, select universities, and private donations from the Heartland community. All this to say, I am incredibly excited to hear what the delegates will be sharing with us. To start, we will have each of the students introduce themselves. So, Morgan, if you'd like to begin.
Yes, hi, my name is Morgan Barba, and I'm currently attending Kansas State University, where I'm getting my master's in agricultural education and communications. I received my bachelor's degree at Fort Hays State University in agricultural education. I'm originally from Henderson, Colorado, and during my time there, I did 4-H for 10 years, which has led to my passion in the agricultural industry. And with that being said, when I graduate, I either hope to be a communication specialist or an outreach director for an association, or become an agricultural education teacher here in Kansas, because I did recently just get my license. One of the reasons I decided to join this trip was because I firmly believe that the opportunity to study or engage in a business abroad is an invaluable experience, especially in today's globalized world. I believe that there's just immense value in gaining firsthand insight in how agriculture operates in other countries and other agricultural landscapes.
All right, thank you so much, Morgan. That was perfect. Moving on now to Sam Martin. Sam, just a quick introduction.
Hi, my name is Sam Martin. I'm currently a senior at Iowa State University studying animal science with a minor in feed science technology. I grew up on a row crop and livestock operation out of Southwest Iowa. I hope to return to that operation post-grad to help expand my family's custom ag business. Along with, I'd like to work with Merck Animal Health on their U.S. Consumer and Value Chain Affairs team. It's an internship experience I had a year or two ago, and I'm hoping to start that again here in January. Yeah, I got interested in the trip. I was approached by the Iowa Soybean Association. I was on the collegiate soy team. It was an opportunity that was presented to me as a delegate representing Iowa. It's obviously soybean agriculture. That's kind of what we do in Iowa. So it's always been kind of in my lifeblood. And I was very honored to be able to attend this trip and look forward to see what comes further as we go down the road from it.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam. Imani, if you'd like to say a few words.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Imani Murphy, and I go to the illustrious Tuskegee University. I'm a second year animal science master's student. I got my Bachelor of Science in Animal Science at Delaware Valley University. A little bit about my background. I'm the National Graduate Parliamentarian for Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences. I'm also from the wonderful state of New Jersey, but I go to school in Alabama. So I am in the Heartland right now. Uh, Eventually, I want to get into food animal medicine and reproductive biology. I hope to become a practicing veterinarian in the next 5 to 10 years. I do want to work with APHIS and other government bodies. And then I joined this trip to further my knowledge on agriculture abroad, especially in China and other large entities. As a member of Manners, which is Minority in Agriculture, it's important to see the diversity of all agricultural endeavors, especially in such a large country as China. Also, I was offered a trip to go to China, and I would never give that. I would never pass that up. So I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful organization. Thank you.
Thanks, Amani. Thanks for saying all that. Really appreciate the sentiment. So likewise, Parker, if you'd like to say a few words.
Yes, of course. I'm Parker Havard. I am a senior studying political science at the Michigan State University. I am originally from DeWitt, Michigan. I did not grow up on a farm, but my family does farm 1,200 acres here in the thumb of Michigan, right off the coast of the lake. And I really got involved with this trip just to gain the invaluable insight into the foreign relationship in agriculture between the U.S. and China, as well as being able to extend that to other countries, taking away skills and tips that I learned from this trip abroad, and hoping to pursue global interests in the commodity market in the future. I hope to represent agriculture from a policy side at the state and federal level in the near future.
All right, wonderful. And next up, Lauren, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Thornhill. I'm currently doing my undergraduate at The Ohio State University, and I'm majoring in agri-science education with minors in animal sciences and production ag. I grew up in Anna, Ohio on a soybean and corn operation, and through 4-H and FFA, I got the opportunity to also raise sheep and train dogs on the side. I was really excited to hear about this trip because through college I got the opportunity to work with a soybean breeding association. And so this trip not only offered the chance to see soybeans on a global scale, but also to see the complexities of ag and how all of these different industries kind of interact. And so I think I was able to definitely learn this and more.
Thank you so much, Lauren. All right, next up is Nathan, who is my understanding you rushed home from your job to join us. So Nathan, thank you so much. And we'd love to hear a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, so just a brief introduction about me. So I was attending Dickinson State University. I just graduated in May, but I was attending at the time of hearing about this trip, and it was, I kind of found out about it last minute, and I'm really grateful to Drew Combs from the North Dakota Trade Office for nominating me, and it was a really, really good experience. So now I'm actually just I picked up a full-time job, and I'm just kind of keeping my eye out for a job kind of in the ag sector, and um, yeah, so.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Nathan. And really appreciate you making the time. I know you really did run home. Awesome. I am now going to turn the microphone over to our board member, Steve, who actually was able to join us for this trip. Steve, if you'd like to say a couple of words.
Great to be here. This was an awesome trip. This delegation, and this isn't everybody, this is a select few, but the entire delegation really put themselves out there. They engaged, they asked smart questions, they shared. It's kind of the ideal trip we like to do. And we had a terrific time. And I think the learning was incredible. The interaction was incredible. And I think they made relationships that will last long beyond this trip. When we do these trips, we like to memorialize them and share them beyond the people who were just in the trip with us. And so the we'll make a film about the trip. It'll be a short documentary that we'll post eventually. Hopefully we'll have it ready in a month or so. But we do have a little trailer, a little teaser, just to give you a feel for what it looked like quickly in 30 seconds. Ellen, if you've got that ready, we can cue that up and show everybody in action.
In June 2025, 21 college students from 15 different universities across 15 states embarked on a week-long learning trip to Beijing and Henan Province, the breadbasket of China. Organized by the U.S. Heartland China Association with support from the U.S. Soybean Export Council and other local stakeholders, the student delegates had a special mission: to study and discuss crucial issues, to promote friendship, and to build trust between the next generation of agricultural leaders in the U.S. and China.
All right. I hope that gave everybody a little bit of a visual of what was going on, smiling faces. I certainly had a wonderful time on this trip, and it was genuinely a pleasure to organize, to be with all of these student delegates who were just wonderfully upbeat, chipper, and just flexible the entire trip. Just a wonderful group of students and future ag leaders. All right, that said, I think we are ready to transition to the meat of the webinar. I'd love to just ask you all a couple of questions about your experience and what you discovered when you were on the ground. I'm sure that it was far and away from anything that you had initially expected when you signed up for this trip. That said, the very first question I'd like to ask is, what surprised you most about Chinese culture or rural communities? I'm going to put Imani on the spot.
Awesome. The biggest shock or surprise about Chinese culture and rural communities, I think this will hit both of those questions. It's how similar they are to the rural South in terms of, how it looks, it's farmland, but also the culture and how a lot of it is family based. A lot of it is community based. So it's just interesting to see the similarities between the rural South in America and the farmland in China. And it was just really great to see. So that was shocking to me because I thought it would be completely different, but human beings are human beings. So we all will have the same sort of characteristics, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I was trying to verbalize this myself actually recently to friends and colleagues, just the way that you don't expect the things that you don't expect, but the way that people are just doing the same thing everywhere you go. People's primary concern is getting home and then, what are they going to eat for lunch the next day? But of course, there were a lot of similarities between everybody who works in ag, which I think was the experience that you all had. That said, I'm going to pass the mic now to Sam. All right, Sam, same question. What surprised you the most about Chinese culture or rural communities?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. Going into this, I come from a rural community in Southwest Iowa. So you have that image that I think you get kind of in your lane that this is how all rural communities are. And there definitely are similarities. I think the biggest similarity or the biggest surprise I saw was like when we actually sat down at a table and had all these dinners together. And the Chinese really emphasized serving others first. You saw it even at the simplest form there, and then it moved out from there. I mean, everyone was so welcoming, whatnot. It made you feel like at home because I feel like that was kind of the way I was raised, and so that is a similarity maybe I didn't expect. That was kind of like, okay, all right, I see where that general rural community line is. I think the differences also lie though in there is such a shift of taking from rural populations and going to an urban setting in China, more so even than that we see in the United States. I mean, we see it a lot in the United States, but I think we see it even more in China. And so seeing that kind of different infrastructure and how things are set up, how grain's handled in those rural communities, that was the biggest difference for me. I think our infrastructure throughout, especially living right in the center of the Corn Belt, on how we move grain and produce and all that is a lot different than their systems. And both systems work, where theirs is more like family tenant farmer style, where these are, we just see a lot of differences, I think, in that. So I think that surprised me a little bit. I didn't expect that big of a difference, and maybe
Mhm.
how the agriculture looks from a field by field basis. But I think when you get down to it, the people's concerns, how farmers act, how they want to talk, that part is the same no matter where you go.
Yes, absolutely.
And
And
Hey,
more on what
Alan,
you,
Sam,
yes.
Sam talked about the food and sitting down to dinner. I think Sam was one of our adventurous eaters,
Yeah.
as were many of you, who tried things that they probably never thought they were going to try before.
Yeah, I've kind of got a rule in my own book that before going to China, if it didn't say oink, cluck, or moo, I never ate it. But I definitely got outside my comfort zone. I think using the same animals sometimes, but different parts of them and cooking them in different ways and ways. I mean, when they had literally a bowl of like fish belly and that fish bladder
Yeah.
that they served us. I mean, I would never guess you could even eat that. So like that part was definitely way different than anything. I don't know. The one big surprise was when we were at one of our banquets and they were serving Palmer's amaranth, which as somebody that worked as an agronomist for a summer, we didn't even know you could eat it. We just wanted to kill it in the fields.
Mhm.
So that was kind of a neat thing to see.
I remember that moment. They were delighted because you told them it was a weed, where you
Yeah.
come from. And they said, "Why
Yeah.
don't you
Yeah.
eat it? Why don't you eat it?" But thank you, Sam. And I loved what you said specifically about the rural and urban divide, because you guys had a very unique experience in China. A lot of people don't visit China. A lot of Americans or foreigners don't visit China outside of Beijing, outside of Shanghai. The established cities that people know to go to. So it was very special. And I think you all had the appreciation that it was very special to visit a city like Zhengzhou, which has such a sort of rural feeling to it, and rural community and an agrarian focus. Um, Fantastic.
If
Min?
I'm and if I may share, if you tell people you went to Zhengzhou, Zhengzhou is one of the big cities. So we actually went way outside the big city
Yes.
to see the rural area. Again, so if people say you went to very rural Zhengzhou, Zhengzhou might feel offended because Zhengzhou considers itself to be a major metropolitan. But one thing I want to share is that I think you guys had an interesting observation. I remember someone say, "Oh, Lazy Susan, it's awesome. We should I totally get one of those." And then there's a tofu dessert. People loved it. So I think there were a lot of interesting discovery how certain things in China is actually quite interesting, could potentially have a market here.
No, absolutely. And would anybody like to follow up, add on more about the sort of rural experience, visiting Zhengzhou and then stepping a little outside Zhengzhou and seeing the crops and the development center and those sort of experiences?
I will just say that, I mean, once we got on the train and headed out of the city, I mean, we could still see big buildings everywhere. It was just insane to see all of that infrastructure. It was absolutely wild. But then when we went even into the mountains, it was just completely open. It was so beautiful to be in those mountains and to be able to see for nothing for miles. And it really gave you that sense of like, wow, we're really out there. It was very interesting.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Parker. Um, Anybody else want to make a couple comments, or else I'll transition to our next question?
I think one of the interesting things that I saw, especially from like urban to rural, was their space utilization. I thought it was really interesting as we were driving along in some of those places, how the crops came like almost right up to the road. And I feel like in a lot of the places that I've seen, there's usually like a margin of grass in between, and usually you see big fields, at least in Ohio, of like soybeans and corn, whereas in there you saw kind of patches of trees and then patches of other crops, and they were all kind of like strategically kind of woven together, which was something I thought was very interesting to see, especially out right up against cities.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Uh, Again, let's see. Anybody else have additional comments? I do want to leave space for you guys.
I just wanted to say, I think the vertical integration that we saw within all of the cities that we visited was just so impressive. I think one of the greatest examples we saw of that was when we visited the Moyen Group, which is a pork processing um, company in China, and seeing how they are vertically integrating to make space for more pork to be processed and produced is just so impressive. And I think that was just one of the really unique aspects of this trip.
Yeah. Were you familiar prior to the sort of pig hotels that Moyen is?
I was not. It was when I saw it, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Why aren't we doing this? Just because of how I was just so interesting to see.
Yeah, it was definitely impressive. I had previously heard of them, but actually seeing those scale models that they put together and the sheer size was uh very surprising. That's it. Anyone else? Anything about the rural communities and the culture that surprised you? All right. Second question that I have for all of you. So, how did this experience shift your perspective on U.S.-China relations, especially as it relates to agriculture? Right on the spot, I'm going to put uh, uh, Parker on the spot.
Yeah, coming from someone who has never left the country, you don't really get a good understanding of just what, like we talked about in the last question, the culture is like and what their communities look like and how we are just very different across the board. I think that understanding their infrastructure and technology really helped gain a big insight into how we could foster better relationships between the two and learn from each other just on strategic strategy or strategic methods to infrastructure and technology. China has seen such a boom in infrastructure in recent years, and having to manage that, and especially when coming to sustainable technology created, we saw a lot of that when it came to agricultural methods, and I think it was very unique of an opportunity to be able to explore those and see those differences that really helped us create a better understanding between the two nations that have recently seen a lot of divide, especially in trade. And that is a very crucial aspect to both of us. And I think it is very important that we continue to work on those relationships and find where we can make cooperation a good part of that relationship, because there is so much that we can learn from each other.
Excellent. Thanks, Parker. Sam, is there anything that you'd like to add to that specifically from your perspective?
Yeah, I thought it was neat. So when we sat down with a lot of like the USDA, a lot of the representatives for the different commodities that the United States exports to China in the United States or from the United States, the big thing is when it comes to Chinese and uh, American relations, from the consensus was American products, hands down, are the best quality on the market. Now, quality comes with a price, right? And trying to balance that in a trade, especially when we have a tenser trade environment currently, I think that is something we're going to have to navigate in the next few years. But it's not from the fact that there isn't a desire for American export products when it comes to an ag base. I think another thing that we talked about, and you could even see in as a shift, is that really in that whole Southeast Asia corridor, but especially in China, we're seeing a shift in diet, a shift in traditional cooking methods as younger generations are moving more to the city. We see more of a modernized approach to some of their cooking methods. I mean, we ate a lot of traditional foods, but we talked about like the impact of, you know, there's more and more demand for high quality beef in the country than that there has been historically. So I think China and America, when we find common ground, like we are two major superpowers that need each other from especially from an ag sector. It's why in trade wars it is targeted first because we know how much people have to eat, no matter what people have to eat. Um, and I think China's setting themselves up domestically with some of their technology to be able to become more and more efficient. But I think it'll be an interesting question as we move forward the next 20 years, especially as their population is still massive, and to have that fed and how they attack that problem from their end and how we work from our end, I think will be huge. So yeah, I guess I always thought that being biased as an American farmer, I always knew we had great products, and it's nice to hear from one of our largest trading partners
Mm.
that they do desire our products. And I think if we keep that and maybe like sub diplomatic relations, those communication lines open, because that's what it comes down to is we want to trade with them, they want to trade with us. We have the same goals. If we can make sure that we keep those goals and those like we're all the kind of the same people at the forefront, I think we'll see a lot of success in the next 20, 25 years. But definitely some problems to work through every time when it comes to this kind of large quantities. But yeah, I look forward to hopefully being a part of that moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. I think you're exactly right. There was a lot of discussion over the course of our trip about, you know, where there are actually still very much opportunities for growth with regards to the U.S. China agricultural trade relationship. You mentioned beef. You mentioned the growing desire for beef and high quality American beef in the Chinese diet. And then other unique opportunities like we don't eat chicken feet here in the States, so shipping chicken feet over. And, you know, maybe we would ship fish bladder, as we had sort of discussed earlier. So just continuing opportunities. But thank you, Sam. Exactly right. I'd like to also pass the torch to Lauren to say a couple words about your impression of the sort of developing U.S.-China relation, especially with ag.
Yeah, I think coming on this trip and being able to see China from this perspective, it really shifted my perspective on relations between countries, especially China and the US. I've always heard the saying that like by yourself you can do a lot, but with other people you can do a lot more. And I think that really holds tried and true to how multiple perspectives and multiple heads together can kind of get a solution to a problem.
Mm.
And I think it was interesting to see China of all places because a lot of the things in China, like climate, environment, and various things like that, are strikingly similar to the US. And yet, when you look at the way people approach things and they approach industries that we know, such as pigs here and pigs there, or soybeans in both countries, they're sometimes very vastly different. And I think that that was really interesting to see some of the things that they hold to be a little bit more important, and so they
Mm.
focus on when they find solutions versus things that we might find important here. For example, when we toured some of like the poultry facilities and the pig facilities, it was interesting to see them right up against urbanization, cities and like parts that are very highly populated. Whereas in at least Ohio, we find them to be very far out from your towns, your cities, and so on and so forth. And so it was interesting to learn that they had combated that by kind of reducing the smell. Poultry and pigs have a very distinct smell. If you'll know a barn's pretty close
Yeah.
by. But we walked right up to those barns in some places in China and had no idea that you probably had no idea it was a pig or poultry operation. And so I think those kinds of striking similarities and differences, there's a lot to learn from. And so I think overall, my perspective really changed on US and China relations because I was able to find out how communication and being able to see these differences and understand how different industries can interact, but also different countries was very, very valuable.
All right, fantastic. And yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying about the pig farms and that unique technology. I think we'd love to bring it back stateside. And I think a lot of people would benefit from that, or at least very much appreciate it. All right, anybody else want to share their thoughts on your developing perspective regarding U.S.-China relations? Anything from the trip that opened your eyes?
I have one thing.
Yeah, of course,
Um,
Amani.
I think it was super interesting to see the different cultural norms that we have in the US versus in China. Because in the rural South, actually, a lot of people eat the offal or things like pig's feet, chicken gizzard, and all those kinds of things. So I think it's interesting to see the difference in cultures and communities within the US as well. Especially because, like, you guys are saying, oh, the US doesn't eat chicken feet. There's a lot of chicken feet that come down to the South. So I just think it's interesting, like the differences between all of us. But yeah, that was it. I just liked that we had things that were similar as well.
No, fantastic. It sounds like I have to head south and get myself some American chicken feet. All right. Anybody else that would like to make some comments, talk about, the opportunities that we've been discussing for American trade in China, U.S. trade? All right, sounds good. We'll move on to question number 3. Yes, Min.
I have a quick comment. So again, it was really interesting. They added the stop of 蜜雪冰城, the slushy, the drink company, because it was really interesting how they were a new, again, Chinese company going with, they have stuffy toys, they have social media, they have influencer, they have people waited outside, and then they have animation, movies, whatnot. It was really fascinating to see this kind of very complex enterprise beyond just the product. Again, they are, again, sustainable supply chain, dairy, whatnot. So I do think that was very impressive for me. It's related to ag, but opened up to this new generation of enterprises coming from China going global. I thought that was really fascinating for me.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody want to respond to Min's comments? Talk about, the fun that they had at Miche Bingcheng, getting to try those free samples, the very, very sweet lemonade that we had. Okay, all right. If there's no one else, then we can move on to question number 3. And I think this is going to be particularly clarifying about your experience and what you took away from it. So, what role do you think that people-to-people exchanges, like this delegation, play in reducing misunderstandings between nations? I'm going to start us off by calling on Parker.
Yeah, you said question number 3. I'm just looking at it. The exchanges that we had with people were invaluable. I actually made some decent friends across, and those were just completely invaluable to be able to connect with one another and bring our backgrounds and share the positives and negatives that we've seen in agriculture in our societies, and being able to then take that and compare it to ourselves and realize that if there was a misunderstanding there, then we can actually fix that and change our thinking. And it really was a benefit for the role of the country on the foreign front, just to have those connections across the sea, especially since they were young ag leaders as well, and we are growing into that position as well, and can really influence the agriculture and trade policy here in the few coming years. I think that is totally valuable for both sides to be able to then take those, realize that there might have been some lingering things along the way that might have been misunderstood, and then taking that and realizing that we can make that change and we can make it better.
Thanks, Parker. That's great to hear. I'm really excited that you've been maintaining these contacts and these connections that you made over the course of the trip. I love to hear that. All right. Additionally, I'd like to ask Lauren to respond to this question. So, Lauren, again, people-to-people relationships, how do you think that they impact the understanding between different nations?
Yeah, I think people-to-people exchanges are extremely important. I think a lot of people in America will never have the opportunity to directly travel to China like we were able to. And I think that by talking to other people and making friends like we did in China with other Chinese students and officials is very valuable, because you can kind of keep that open communication and be able to understand things from their perspective. Hearing stories from some of the friends that I made there about like how they grew up and how that differed from like how we grew up over here. Or one of my friends, she was talking about her university and how her focus of study was just a little bit different than what I would see here in the US. And I think understanding that, like, just the way your background is or the things that you've experienced throughout your life changes is a great way to almost visit the country, even if you've never set foot in it. And so I think that's very valuable when it comes to potential misunderstandings between countries and things kind of that nature, because we can start to understand where a country comes from by understanding where people come from. And so I think that will very much pave the way to making compromises in the future because we understand that we have common goals, even if we don't come from the same perspective.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lauren. And everything that you said is wonderful because that's exactly the point of the trip. As people have commented, we could have just handed you a pamphlet about China relations, about China agricultural practices, but going there and talking to the people. I love that you referred to one of the contacts that you made there as your friend, you know? We want you to meet people and learn about their experiences. So thank you so much, Lauren. Beautiful. All right. Anybody also want to talk about the people that they met, the conversations that they had over there? Were they anything like you expected? Anything stand out? No unique conversations? Parker, Lauren, do you want to follow up on that question? All right, we can move on then. We'll talk a little bit about the next question, question 4. What were the most innovative agricultural practices or technologies that you observed in China? We've mentioned a couple of them, but if you want to go into greater depth and specifically things that surprised you, things that you didn't expect, and things that you think would be very beneficial to American agriculture as well. So a lot of follow-up questions there, but I'd like to begin by asking Morgan. Morgan, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ellen. I was so impressed with the use of technology in China, especially using artificial intelligence or AI. And I think the integration of this AI in China's pork production system was just so impressive. Kind of like I mentioned earlier on in our conversation, companies like Moyen and Smithfield are using just AI to improve processing cleanliness, reduce bacterial exposure, and just enhance meat quality, specifically when it comes to grading carcasses when we're going through that pork process. I think that was just such a great integration, and I'm going to be really curious as soon or when we'll have that integration here in the United States because I definitely think there's some great value to it. Additionally, I was just also impressed by the research that's happening at the Henan Modern Agricultural Experimental Demonstration Base when we were there, specifically with the research coming in with drought tolerant wheat varieties and just the selective breeding that we were seeing of those medicinal herbs, both things that are just super important to their culture. And I also thought this, like the water usage and their sustainability efforts with their water diversion projects were absolutely amazing. And it was just all really, really interesting to see.
Yes, the scale is just mind-boggling when you see it up close. And everything that you said is very topical. I think it's on everybody's mind, just AI and what sort of applications they can have in every capacity, and particularly in ag. And what was it? There was 1 billion data points that Muyan was collecting every day just from their various sensors and trackers and variables that they were looking into. It was incredibly impressive to see. I would agree with you. Thank you, Morgan. So likewise, I'm going to ask Nathan to follow up. What particularly stood out for you? What was most impressive that you saw?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I was really impressed by, like Lauren and Morgan mentioned, at the pork processing facilities, just the amount of technology integration that they have at those facilities and how they make it really just a better place, more efficient, more clean, and even kind of the smaller things. So just how they use water from the processing to water their lawns. They filter it and they water their lawns with it. So they have really nice facilities, and they're really cool to look at. That doesn't, it doesn't even look like a pork processing facility until you go in the building. And I kind of relate it to a common buzzword in the U.S. today in agriculture being precision ag, and
Mm,
that really, I think, embodies what we think of when we say precision ag, is just the level of time and effort that they put into those operations that we witnessed, and some of the technology that they implemented that they were able to be very successful with, as well as some of the things that they were proposing that they were trying to implement. It just it really speaks volumes to their level of precision that they and care that they put into their agricultural processes.
Thank you, Nathan. And I think that exactly illustrates the point. Morgan talking about AI, Nathan, precision agriculture, these things that are very relevant to the US and things that we're considering over here, it's also happening in China. And this is exactly why we have trips like this, to have these conversations and these sort of useful comparisons, and where we might better understand each other and the progress that each nation is making in each respective field, in each respective technology. So thank you, Nathan. Does anybody have a follow-up statement, something that we haven't covered that they'd really like all of our audience to take away from this trip?
I think one really innovative practice that I found very, very interesting to kind of see implemented was we had went to one farm where they had about 3 million laying poultry hens. And they also had a crocodile farm on the side. And so I think what was very interesting about that to me and kind of innovative is how they use the two industries, which could be very separately raised, together. Their poultry they use to kind of feed into their crocodile operation, quite literally, using that as kind of a way to feed their crocodiles. And from both industries, they use the fertilizer or the manure as fertilizer in orchards. And so I thought that was a very innovative way to think about how you can put these industries together.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm
I
glad that you mentioned that. Min?
I want to weigh in a little bit because this trip is actually, as you guys know, shorter than the trip we went on last year. And last year we went to quite a few different areas, and we learned from our American agriculture experts that there are many areas that U.S. agriculture is still way ahead. So it's I think just like you have guests come to your house, you want to show them the best. So I think we were shown some of the most impressive, but I do think we shouldn't forget that in many, many ways, U.S. agriculture is still world leading. As Sam said, we have some of the best products. And so this is where win-win, right? We have a lot of scale, we have a lot of advantages, and yet they have some advantages too. So again, just want to kind of share a little bit so you realize that not everything in China is better than here on the ag front.
No, precisely right, Min. They always show us the very best that they have to offer, which was why it made such a impressive and beautiful trip, and I think why everybody had such a wonderful time. But that said, I think it would be hard to forget for especially all of these future ag leaders, the sort of prevalence of American ag and its dominance in the global market. Yeah, anybody else have something that they'd like to say, follow up on? Otherwise, we can sort of transition. So in a similar vein, my follow-up question, how do Chinese approaches to sustainable farming compare to those in the US? And I'm going to call on Parker.
The sheer amount of technology, like we've mentioned in the past few questions, has really done wonders for their sustainable practices. Coming back, I've been working on some research about their carbon emissions and other sustainability tactics that they're employing, specifically when it comes to topics that we are exploring as we enter the 21st century and get to the tipping point of the mid-century. Really working on less utilization of land, so smaller fields, but bigger yields. And that's what we see here. And that's what we're seeing there in China on a lot more of a modern front. They have really done well at utilizing less land while also producing a mass amount of yields. We saw a lot of, especially with the research base that Morgan mentioned earlier, that was just an insane amount of technology in one place working on sustainable practices that we could see implemented around the world in just a few years to help better some of these conditions that we're facing headed further into the 21st century. I think it is incredible the sheer amount of research that they put into their agriculture. We might be really good at producing, but they are really good at researching and figuring out best practices for the betterment of the environment and the climate and us as human beings. It is really extravagant. to be able to explore all of their different work that they are doing when it comes to sustainable agriculture and sustainable technology in and of itself.
Thanks, Parker. I think that was entirely summative of the point, and I'd like to hone in on what you were saying. Posing the question, what lessons can American farmers or ag students learn from their Chinese counterparts and vice versa? We've mentioned a couple things already, but I'd like to open the floor. So starting out, Imani, if you'd like to say a few words.
Some lessons that we can learn from our Chinese counterparts and something that they can learn from us, I think is that everything's not as different as you think. I think we've been talking about a lot of differences and similarities, but I honestly, in my opinion, think that there's a lot more similarities than there's differences. And it's just interesting to see how similar our programs can be. And, you know, whether it's like an example I'll give is for the universities that we visited. On the last university we visited, we were able to just see the students' day-to-day life, and actually it was finals week during that time. So it was just interesting to see everybody rushing around, trying to get to their tests, even seeing people take graduation photos on the quad with their stoles and hoods and things like that, or even from when we went to Henan University to see how they thresh their wheat. It was just interesting to see all of that. And I think we should really hone in on both of our similarities and differences and how we can come together and communicate well to become better ag leaders in China and in the United States, especially because we're probably two of the top producers in our respective fields. So why not come together?
I love that answer, Imani. That's perfect. You're answering not just what lessons can we learn in a very academic setting, but what sort of interpersonal lessons we can learn from each other. That's absolutely right. Thank you so much, Imani. I'd like to also ask Sam for his perspective. What lessons can American farmers or ag students learn from their Chinese counterparts?
Yeah, I think so. We've talked a lot about scale, especially on the hog side. And so, like in the '90s, when we started switching to confinement barns in the United States, it totally flipped the hog industry on its head. It is a totally different industry now than when my dad was growing up in high school, when they were raising just like 200 sows and that was it, right? So I think we developed a lot of that technology, the first confinement barns and that modern hog production here in the United States, and obviously our Chinese counterparts have taken that to the next level with the pig hotel. Now, I don't know, looking at it through a biosecurity lens and a logistical lens, and somebody that comes from a family farm where my grandparents in Southeast Iowa, they got 8,000 hogs on their farm. I know there comes a lot of challenges with, you know, disease prevention and all that. And I know they've established tactics to do that. But when we have multiplied our hog population and centered that to an even larger scale than we've done in past, I think there's going to be some challenges that we're going to have to figure out together, especially if it's something that we see move. You know, our ag systems could probably handle that kind of demand and that kind of hog intensity if it works in China. I think it's technology that probably could be implemented here in the United States, mainly from the fact that labor is our biggest problem. And if you can, you know, concentrate your populations of product needing less labor, the economies of scale kind of run into play then. But I don't know. My major concern on that would be biosecurity and then also manure management. And that goes back to sustainable agriculture. And when it comes to concentrated animal feeding operations here in the U.S., we have a lot more stringent rules on. I mean, it has become a thing in the last, especially 10 to 15 years, making sure we're protecting groundwater and surface runoff and all that. So I think both parties have parts to contribute to that, solving those problems and making a more affordable and cheap protein source. So I guess when it comes to mine asking that, where can we learn? It can be applied to other things, but that's the number one place as a specific example coming from the trip that I think there'll be a lot of back and forth if we were wanting to change hog production again. for the second time in the last 30-ish years.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. And everything you said regarding um, specific shared challenges is exactly right. We're getting close to the top of the hour. So I'm going to make sure that we have plenty of time for the Q&A session. So really rapid fire, something that I really want you guys to address. I'm going to smash some of these questions together. So how has this experience influenced your career goals and any interest in global agriculture? And additionally, if you'd like to tack on, what was your sort of biggest takeaway from this trip? Two big meat questions, but I'd love to start first with Morgan.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep it definitely brief. Honestly, the biggest takeaway from this trip and just how it influenced my career goals is that it reinforced the importance of agricultural advocacy on the global stage, and that there is the power of presence and being there firsthand. One of the quotes that has resonated with me, stuck with me this entire time, is that one eyewitness is better than 10 hearsays, and I think that this sums up my experience pretty greatly, especially when I have conversations with other folks about my trip.
All right, thank you so much, Morgan. Perfect. Passing the torch now to Nathan, if you'd like to respond to, how has this impacted your career trajectory? Have you developed a sort of interest in global agriculture?
I think I definitely have to agree with Morgan as far as just like how she said the power of presence. So just having that firsthand experience, being able to see those foreign practices, see the strategies, their ag strategies that they implement, and through having the opportunity to visit production sites and communicate with ag leaders and producers and just to have that chance, I think I've really, really gained a considerably greater appreciation for their contribution to global agriculture as a whole. And as far as career goals, it kind of blew my mind just how involved these two countries are with each other, as far as USDA foreign constituents in China, through the U.S. Soybean Export Council, Meat Export Federation, you name it. The fact that those positions even exist over there just speak volumes to the level of cooperation. And I never even realized that um, people make these sacrifices to move to a foreign country and take up those jobs. And it was really impressive. And I can't say that maybe that'd be something that I'd want to do, but it was really cool to see that and be able to talk with those people about their experiences and how they view their job as important.
Wonderful. You never know, Nathan. Maybe I'll be seeing you in Beijing, working at the embassy. But perfect. Thank you so much. And rapid fire, I'd love to also ask Lauren, tell me a little bit about how this has impacted your career, and personal takeaways that you've had.
Yeah, I definitely think the connections throughout this trip have really impacted my career because it's opened my eyes to a couple fields that kind of fall between fields that I didn't know existed, especially with soybeans. And so I really have learned a lot from talking to different people in China and hope to continue those connections. And so I think the biggest highlight of my trip was being able to see China from another person's perspective while also kind of seeing it from my own. I think that really gave a very wide view on what China is like and what agriculture in China is like.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Lauren. And finally, I'd like to pass the torch to Imani, if you'd like to talk about what your experience was in this trip, what you're taking away from it.
So my experience from this trip was just that China is one of our can be one of our partners. And I would like to work in the agricultural sector, in the global sector. I didn't realize that there were so many jobs for animal scientists out there and veterinarians out there. So when talking to the veterinarian in APHIS, it made me realize that that is something that I do want to do while working in food animal medicine and disease control, as well as reproductive physiology. And then my last takeaway is that crocodiles are nature's way of turning chicken farm waste into a closed loop system with some teeth. So I think that's pretty cool. That's all I got for you.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much, Imani. And on that note, I'm going to open the floor from questions. Anybody in the audience, if there's something that you'd like to ask our student delegates about their experience, then please go ahead. I'm going to be moderating the Q&A chat, so at any moment, if you'd like to hop on and send in your questions, fantastic. In the meantime, I have a couple of personal questions that I'd like to ask the students. So I'm sure that you have this conversation a lot with the people once you return home, but what do you feel was the largest sort of emotional impact that you had? What was your experience that sort of stuck with you?
I think for some of them was the food, right? And the food.
I certainly think that that was a surprise for people. People come to China sort of maybe expecting General Tso's or Kung Pao chicken, but there's so much variation in flavor to the cuisine.
I will say there are a few questions in the Q&A. The first one is talking about, unlike in the United States, were there any apparent negative environmental characteristics in rural/farm communities? Did anyone see anything? Again, I'm aware of, I can share what we know that we may not have witnessed. But did you guys notice anything on the trip? Negative environmental characteristics?
I guess there wasn't any.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I guess there wasn't like, I mean, super apparent environmental impact, but I think it definitely is like, if you read between the lines, you could see the potential for it. I go back to the large hog pig hotel from a guy that's had to haul a lot of manure out of a 2,500 head barn. I just know that could be something that is going to be addressed. Great fertilizer if used appropriately, but I think that would be one of my biggest ones. My other one was the water project was very, very impressive. My only concern looking at it from, and I'd have to dig more and more into it, is when you start shifting water that much from a natural flow, how does that change environments, you know? And it could be for positive too, but like when you start moving water, I remember in school, we even had to learn about how the differences in environment changes from bottling water from the Great Lakes and shipping it to the middle of Arizona, how that can change environment and the environmental impact. So I think it's something to look into more. Those are like the two big ones I can think of that from an environmental standpoint of, hey, if you dig back, if you dig into this more, what does this look like? But I guess those are my opinion.
Parker, you were going to say something?
I was going to touch on the water diversion project. That was the only thing that was really apparent going in and doing subsequent research about it. When you mess with water that has a natural flow, there's always going to be your downsides. They had to do it for the benefit of their agriculture and for their water resources, and they did great with it. It was a stunning project to explore and see what they've been doing out there. It was just immaculate, but there are those challenges that come with diverting that much water for human use. It's not meant for that. The water is not there for us really to be changing its flow. So exploring that afterwards was really interesting to then have to compare those pros and cons and what was going through the heads of those who were creating this project and were doing it to influence their economy there. It was really interesting thought that goes into that.
Anyone else? So a couple of things we know of from other visits we had is one, there's a lot of use of plastic. A lot of use in packaging, in shipping, even covering the ground. So that's one concern. But China is just like the pig, they lost all their pig in the African swine fever. So a lot of the new technology we saw is a reaction to that. They have to kind of arise from the ashes and so learn very fast. But yeah, there have been a lot of mistakes made in the past that had led them to where they are today. I hope that addressed the first question. I think the other one was about cell culture beef. Oh, Ambassador Quinn has a question. After trip, do you now see China as more of a partner or an adversary? That's a good question. Maybe, Alan, we can end with that question. So we can do the thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you want to do that? So after the trip, do you now see China as more of a partner or an adversary? So if you think it's partner, thumbs up. If you're neutral, thumb in the middle. And if you think adversary, thumbs down. I'm getting one thumbs up, thumbs up. Neutral, great. That's overall positive, I would say. So I'm gonna average that. So, but okay,
Sorry.
great. I think no worries. Actually, I have to share with you. For a small NGO like us, this kind of work is very challenging. As you know, there's a lot of uncertainty, but we're very thankful. And as you remember, you were applauded for being courageous and brave to come. It's no kidding, because there are people who don't want this kind of exchange to happen. You know, they would rather just relations get really, really bad. But we really believe that there's an upside for both countries. We can figure it out how to work together, right? So thank you for your contribution to be able to open your mind and understand China a bit more. Again, we look forward to having you guys continue to be engaged and involved as we try to do our part to help this two largest economy and then figure out how to get along. With that, I'm going to hand it to Steve or Alan to wrap it up for us.
No, I think that that's the perfect close. You said it all, Min. Again, just thanking our audience for attending the session. I think it's so important to hear student voices, specifically in this space. That's why we had this trip. That's why we focused on future ag leaders specifically. So to our future ag leaders, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspectives. That's it. All right.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and good luck with the fall, and stay in touch.
Thank you.
Everyone.